to Crime in Court. This is my series titled Executed Justice for Justin Root, and today we're going to go over some of the legal process and how the system is designed pretty much to protect its own. So all of the DAs, the courts, the everybody who's involved in the investigation of this case has basically protected the system, which means protected themselves, protected their own, peers, things like that. So that is what we're going to get into today. We're also going to talk about other possible options that the Root family could take in order to try to get justice for their family member, their loved one, Justin. So let's dive in and please make sure you hit the like button, subscribe. I have two more episodes in this series. Um, to go. So make sure that you are subscribed so that you have notifications and all that good stuff for future episodes. All right, so let us get started here. I'm going to shrink myself. That's not it. There we go. Okay, I'm on a different screen, so bear with me. All right, so this episode is titled Justice Denied, Corrupt System Protects Its Own. So just a brief overview of the circumstances of this case. We've gone through it in great detail on my channel in previous episodes. This, we're just going to go briefly over the details of the case right now. So, just in case you need a little refresher. So, on February 7th, 2020, Justin Root, who was struggling with mental health issues, was shot and killed by police after a car chase from Boston to Brookline. So, if you recall, just very briefly, I'll give you the description or give you kind of the circumstances here. So, Justin Root was in the area of Brigham and Women's Hospital that morning because he was experiencing a mental health crisis. He had a planned psychotherapist appointment that was happening that morning, and uh, either I don't know if it was on his way there or after. I think it was after, but I'm not really sure. He was well, he had some interactions with the security at Brigham and Women's Hospital, and he had a paintball gun on him, and that apparently he showed it to, according to the security guard. Justin Root flashed his gun at him and said, "I'm law enforcement," which was part of his mental illness, by the way, that he believed he was law enforcement. So, um, they called the police to come attend to someone with a gun, basically, and which was false because he had an unarmed, or he was unarmed. He had a toy gun, a plastic clear paintball gun, which was not charged, no ammo in it, nothing in it. Like you couldn't even use it for paintball guns or for paintballs, and it was useless basically as a weapon other than you could hit someone with it, but that was it. So that was he carried it in a holster with him on occasion frequently because that was part of his mental health issues. So the initial incident started in Boston, which was outside of that Brigham and Women's Hospital. He was shot multiple times there. Remember, it was Officer Godin and Officer St. Peter who were there, shot and fired multiple rounds at Justin, hitting him, striking him. He fell down, got up, and got in his car and started driving away at like a normal speed, right? But then the police start chasing him and start progressing and start, going after him. And it begins to turn into a high speed car chase. And then it ends in Brookline after an illegal pit maneuver from Officer Joseph McMenemy, and that kind of threw his car off, I think, threw him off. And in that process, he sped up. He hit multiple other vehicles. His vehicle became disabled, lost multiple wheels. He got out of the vehicle, basically staggered onto the sidewalk into like a mulched area and collapsed. He tried to get up again, collapsed again. Someone nearby, a Good Samaritan who had EMT experience, was there trying to help. Officers pulled up immediately to the scene and basically yelled at her with guns pointed to get away. And within seconds, Justin Root has succumbed to multiple fatal shots. So that's kind of the incident, or a brief overview of what happened. So the fatal shooting occurred in Brookline, not in Boston. So in Brookline near Route 9 and Hammond Street, with officers firing 31 shots within 3 seconds. They claimed that Root reached for the gun. There's no video of this, no clear evidence of him having a gun, first of all, or reaching for a gun. So, some more key details from the shooting. Root initially pulled out a clear plastic paintball gun, okay, from his side holster, which I already told you about. This is near Brigham and Women's Hospital, which led to what I spell that makes no sense. Which led to a shooting here and then a high speed chase. So there's two shooting incidents. So I by clarifying it as the earlier shooting, that's the Boston shooting and then the Brookline shooting. So this the police thinking that he had this gun on him, which was indeed a clear plastic paintball gun. You can tell the difference between the way that looks in his hand versus a real gun. This is Officer Godin here. This is Justin Root here. And you can see a huge difference in what the guns look like. Also, I want to bring this point up. I don't know if this has been brought up or not, but who drew their weapon first? Do we know? I mean, is this clear who drew it first? Because in this still shot of the footage, it looks like Godin's hand is way up higher than Root's. So did Godin point his gun at him first? I don't know this for a fact. This is something that I think maybe the family might want to look into to be specific on who drew first because that could be a big deal. So just an FYI, maybe that might be something that you might want to look into just because from this screenshot you can see that Godin's hand is clearly extended much higher, and that would mean that he probably drew his weapon first. I would just assume. I don't know. Anyways, and maybe not. Maybe in the video it's very clear that Justin did it first. I'm not sure exactly, and I don't have well, maybe we do have the video, but I haven't like slowed it down second by second to see who did it first. But I think that may be an important factor there. Anyways, moving on. So clearly this is not a black BB gun, but a black BB gun was found at the scene after the Brookline shooting. The family argues that Root was incapacitated and unarmed at the Brookline scene, which is corroborated by the EMT Good Samaritan because she said his eyes were rolling back in the back of his head. It looked like lights on, no one home. Those were like her words. The lights on, but no one was home. So, meaning he was likely not understanding what was going on and possibly losing consciousness and struggling for his life before the second round of gunshots. All right, so the family's legal battle timeline begins. So, February 7th, 2020 is when the incident takes place. 4 months later, August 7th, 2020, the family has filed a federal lawsuit against the officers and the city of Boston, alleging wrongful death due to excessive force, assault, and battery. They, what was I going to say? I just lost my train of thought. Oh, so remember, at this point in time, about 30 days after the incident, DA Morrissey comes out and says, "We did nothing wrong. Our officers did everything by the book, basically, even though they didn't. And they didn't follow protocol, but we didn't find anything liable or, no criminal actions, nothing like that. We're not even going to punish the guys." So there's that. So that happened about, February, March, and now August, the family is filing a federal lawsuit against the officers. Well, it begins as, sorry, not a federal. It starts out at the district court. That's misleading. I didn't notice that when I wrote that. Sorry. But they file it with the district court and it goes all the way to the federal level. Starts out district court, which we're going to get into. So the district court, December 5th, 2022. So as you can see, this is 2 years plus later, and the district court is finally coming back with some kind of answer. So there's been a bunch of litigation in those 2 years for the family just to get to an answer with the district court. And the district court basically sides with City of Boston, the Boston PD officers and the state trooper, basically saying accountability isn't going to happen because they've got qualified immunity. This word or this phrase, qualified immunity, irks me so bad. I hate it. It needs to go away. It's a garbage rule that people just came up with to protect themselves, and I think it needs to go bye-bye forever. So, we'll get into that. What is qualified immunity? Basically, it is a legal doctrine. It is federal and state uh, accepted. So, qualified immunity protects government officials like police officers, prosecutors, and judges alike from civil lawsuits unless their actions violate clearly established constitutional rights. But getting a court to agree to that is the problem. They don't like to agree that anybody's constitutional rights have ever been denied or violated in any way. So that is in and of itself the highest bar, I think, in all of our courts, is to overcome this qualified immunity because it is BS. Also, qualified immunity shields corrupt cops, prosecutors, and judges alike by making it hard to hold them accountable, often dismissing cases when there's clear misconduct involved, and it can lead, obviously, to injustice for the family members of these victims. And victims, like there are victims who are still alive who are, probably running in prison for having their, constitutional rights violated. So there are many, many layers of victims of the corrupt cops and the corrupt system that is happening right now. Um, this also protects corrupt Canoni, in the Massachusetts or in Norfolk County there with Bev Canoni, who has clearly violated Karen's rights multiple times and was extremely just not fit. Like she showed she's not fit to be on the bench, but qualified immunity, it's just within her right. It's all, her discretion, judge's discretion, a lot of it. So nothing protects the victims and it's garbage. And like I said, qualified immunity needs to go bye bye. All right, so up next, the family's legal battle regarding their federal appeals. So before we get into the federal appeal, let me explain how the Massachusetts courts work. This is confusing, especially for me who's not from Massachusetts. I needed to do some research on this. So you've got your district court, which is obviously like your state lowest level court. That's like where Karen Reed's trials are, Aiden Carney's trials. Usually, it's not superior court. It doesn't happen in the higher courts. Those happen in the state court. That's district court. Then you have what's called in Massachusetts the First Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the first layer of appeals, the first level. So you've got your district court, Court of Appeal, First Circuit Court of Appeals, it's called, which is very confusing because why is it first? Is there a second? Is there a third? No, it goes next to Supreme Court. So I don't know why it's called that, but that's what it is. So, anywho, so district court, then the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and then you can finally go federal Supreme Court. So, remember, we left off with December 5th, 2022, district court granted the summary judgment basically in favor of all of the defendants. Now we're on April 22nd, 2024. So, again, the courts move very slowly, especially in cases like this, a civil case. So the First Circuit in 2024 of April, the First Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed the district court's ruling dismissing the case despite evidence of Root's condition. So basically, the Root family appealed to the First Circuit Court and they denied it. They dismissed the case outright. They're just like, nope, nah, we're not going to look at it. Case dismissed. Then in January of 2025, Supreme Court, they've brought it up now to the Supreme Court level. The Supreme Court denied hearing their case, which is their certiorari, the writ of certiorari, which is what they're asking basically to have the federal Supreme Court hear their case. Supreme Court denied it. As you can see, I did put the a screenshot of the docket here. So January 13th, their petition was denied. They then um, file a petition for a rehearing in February, and on March 10th, that rehearing was denied. So they're basically like, can you please, kind of rethink that answer a little bit? We'd like to be heard. And they denied it. The Supreme Court denied hearing them for a second time. So that now ends the family's federal appeal options and basically denies them justice at every step of the way. And look how long it's taken just to get a non response from the courts, a non helpful response. So, in the court filings for the federal Supreme Appeal, the family argued that the lower courts created unfair summary judgment rules, weighing evidence against them and ignoring facts of the case. Um, and especially that qualified immunity is just something they can't seem to get over. They also claim that the circuit court split on their decision on the deadly force standards, warranting the Supreme Court a review. So basically, because the circuit court didn't all agree, then that basically warrants the Supreme Court to look at this case. And they haven't, which is just complete garbage because they're like, no. And that's just how Supreme Courts are. So the courts basically side with all of the lying officers in this case. So the district court protects its own, basically citing qualified immunity. Then you've got the First Circuit Court of Appeals who protects its own, citing qualified immunity. And then finally, you have the federal Supreme Court protecting its own, citing yet again qualified immunity. So herein lies the problem is this qualified immunity. They really need to do away with this. Can you imagine though, like what the ramifications would be once qualified immunity is gone and how many cases they could look into retroactively? That would be amazing. But we're definitely not there yet. But if this ever were to take place, that this were to be abolished, it would be just something so fantastic for the Root family and for other families that have been affected by police violence or any kind of misconduct or constitutional violations. So, Even though the courts have basically exhausted the family's appeals, they're not out of options yet. So I've done some research, I've come up with a few ideas. A lot of this they're already doing. So, to Jen's credit, Jennifer Root, who is pictured here, uh, Justin's sister, she has been a huge vocal supporter for the issues in this case and trying to advocate for these issues and trying to get reform. So we're going to talk a little bit more about her. It kind of turned into a fangirling for her because she's doing so much and doing an awesome job. And Jen, if you're watching, and I hope you are, great job. Keep it up. You have support behind you. And, let me know if there's anything I can do over here in Chicago. Because I would be just totally, you know, grateful to give you guys support and help in your endeavors. So let's look at some of the things that the family can do. The first option, they could file a new lawsuit with different claims or different defendants. So you basically can't relitigate the same things, right? So the original lawsuit was a wrongful death lawsuit due to, excessive force, assault and battery, that type of angle. But they could do perhaps some other kind of claim, like negligence, intentional infliction of emotional distress, or a wrongful death citing failure to provide medical aid post shooting. So, because they shot him in the first incident and then they escalated and chased and did all these things, and they failed to provide any kind of medical assistance after they shot him and did an illegal pit maneuver, they're in the wrong there. So there is some definite, possibility there, but I don't know if that's even. We'll get to that. There might be some challenges with filing a new lawsuit, but so some other examples of new lawsuits would include filing against individuals or entities who have not already been named. So they've filed against the city of Boston, the individual officers involved, but they could perhaps bring a suit against Brigham and Women's Hospital, or for the security failing to and neglecting to manage Root's mental health crisis appropriately, instead of escalating it to the level that they did. So maybe there's something there. I don't know. Also, if new evidence were to come to light, such as undisclosed body cam footage, or if a witness were to come forward, say one of the officers maybe grew a conscience and told the truth, then maybe we might get some options for a new case to file a new lawsuit. Challenges, though, apparently, with filing a new lawsuit. Massachusetts has a 3-year statute of limitations for wrongful death suits and personal injury. So that basically expired February 7th, 2023. So some kind of special circumstances would need to be proven in order to, allow for another wrongful death suit, perhaps. Whoops, I just went way too fast. Uh, without new evidence becoming available or new legal theories, such as, uh, negligence, failure to aid medical or failure to provide medical aid, things like that. Without a new theory or a new evidence available, a new lawsuit is unlikely, unfortunately, due to res judicata, which means you can't relitigate the same thing again. So these things the things that have already been put forth in front of a judge, you can't relitigate. And then, even if there is a new lawsuit that's filed, qualified immunity is still a giant hurdle to overcome. Qualified immunity is the problem here. If you're not kind of catching on to the theme, it's qualified immunity that's the issue for the most part. All right. So, another option that the family has is to pursue administrative or disciplinary actions. And to my knowledge, I don't know if they've done this, but with all that Jen's done, I'm sure she's already looked into this and tried if she could. So, she could file formal complaints with law enforcement. So, family could file complaints with either the Boston PD and or the Post Commission, which Post that stands for the Massachusetts Peace Officers Standards and Training Commission. They're the ones that oversee the certifications of officers in Massachusetts, and they can decertify you. So they would be the ones to really contact here. So Officer Godin's failure to wear body cam is one thing that they could, file their complaint on, and his lying about it. And also Officer McMenamin's unauthorized pit maneuver. That would be another example of something that they could file complaints about to either BPD or the Post Commission. And again, I don't know if the family has done that. They probably already have, so not really sure. Some outcomes that could come from disciplinary or pursuing disciplinary action would be disciplinary actions such as a suspension or even just retraining these officers could be of benefit, don't you think? Especially since they had the wrong guns, they didn't have their body cam, they didn't follow protocol, they went right up to Justin, no cover, all sorts of things that they shouldn't have done. And retraining is, I'm a layperson and I can tell you this. I'm a layperson and I could point out multiple issues with what law enforcement did that day. The fact that they can't, that's a serious issue. That's a serious problem. They definitely all need some retraining there. The post commission investigations, they would open their own investigations into this if it were to go to post, and that could lead to officer decertification if they felt that it was appropriate in this circumstance. If if the family brought some complaints about Godin or McMenamy or who knows. Some challenges, though, with this would be that Boston Police Department has a lack of transparency, as we've seen, and an unwillingness to discipline their officers based on their, past performance, our past experience with the BPD. We know that they don't like to take accountability and um, clearly cover for their own. So it seems. So, especially with the Boston Police Department report citing no criminal liability, no misconduct and all that stuff. Same with the DA's reports that cited no misconduct on the part of the officers and no findings of criminal liability, which if you or I did something like that on our jobs without following protocol, you'd be fired in an instant, most likely, or dealt with, pretty quickly in some regard. But not with the police. You can just have a free for all there, apparently. Another thing that the family can do is advocate for legislative or policy reforms, which the family is absolutely doing this. This would include systemic change. So the family could fight for systemic changes such as abolishing qualified immunity, which would require change in the federal legislation. So they were already working on this, I can tell you that. Mandatory crisis training to handle individuals experiencing a mental health crisis. That's something that clearly Boston PD and even Brigham and Women's Security could benefit from some crisis training for mental health patients. Also, systemic change for pushing for independent oversight instead of having the cops reviewing themselves, policing themselves. Why don't we have an independent third party who maybe made up of retired law enforcement from other states who have no connections to Massachusetts, perhaps. Get some kind of independent something going on where retired law enforcement want to work. They want a purpose. They want something to do. Give them something to do. This would be, you know, helping out both. So pushing for an independent oversight with especially in police shootings would be a key change with what would help in this case, especially for policy reform. So some possible outcomes when advocating for legislative or policy reform, you've it could benefit future cases, not necessarily getting justice in Justin's case necessarily, but it could benefit future cases and possibly even save lives if there are, the officers are retrained and things like that. It could also contribute to policy reform with the BPD, like stricter body cam compliance and here's the key, enforce disciplinary actions for officers who don't comply. Like, okay, so we know Godin didn't comply with the uh, body cam, but yet, and he lied about it, and nothing happened to him. So we know he lied about it. We have him on camera doing something different than what he says he's doing with it. He threw it in his car after the fact. We see him do this on camera. Why was there no disciplinary action for this officer? Again, we know that Joseph McMenemy decided to do an illegal, unauthorized pit maneuver on Justin during a car chase, escalating the situation, causing a dangerous situation for others, causing injuries to others. Why is he not held accountable for his actions that day? Why are none of those officers held accountable? What's her face lied. Officer Figueroa lied about the never seeing the gun, or I did see the gun, the BB gun, or well, now it's a BB gun we know, but she says she didn't see the gun, and then she did see the gun, and then she couldn't remember getting it from his hand, but Officer or Trooper Keneally told us that she got it out of Root's hand, but she didn't tell us that. That's another thing that, there's some inconsistencies with these officers' reports of that day, and there's no disciplinary action, no curiosity to find out more about their inconsistencies. The only thing that happened was that they had to do a second interview of Godin for the about the body cam, and that's because they got caught. Basically, another body cam came out showing that Godin put his body cam in his car. So that's the only reason why they went back and revisited this. Otherwise, they don't want to touch misconduct or not following protocol by their officers. They don't want to look into it. They're just going to say everything's hunky dory. But there's a problem with that because people are dying, people are getting injured, and it's due to their actions. And you've got victims and victims' family members who are screaming at the rooftops, "We want justice," and it's not happening for them. And that's so unfortunate. So, yes, bring us punishment, disciplinary actions for the officers who don't comply with the rules. That would be a huge change in the Boston PD if that were to happen. So, some challenges, of course, with all of these, there are challenges. Challenges with advocating for legislative or policy reform would be that legislative reform is extremely slow and often requires support from government officials or a very strong public outcry. So, I mean, something like a George Floyd, for instance, might trigger a large group or large groups of people to become more active and interested in pursuing justice this way. Then, something there might have to be a catalyst for something to happen where, the world gets more involved, is what I'm saying. Um, Also, qualified immunity still requires change on a federal level. This has been tried at least on state grounds. I'm not sure on level or how much on federal level, but I know on on the state level, this has been tried many times, a lot of times to no avail because of qualified immunity. They're it's the their sword. I can't speak. It's their sword and their shield because they're just going to use it to silence the public and say, nope, we didn't do anything wrong. And then also another challenge would be that you this reform would require lobbying state legislators, testifying at hearings, or joining coalitions with other family members that have been impacted by police shootings. I can tell you, Jen has done basically all of these things. So, all right. So, number four, the fourth thing that they could possibly do is join advocacy and human rights groups. This is something that Jen has excelled in. We're going to get into her specifically, what she's done, but so some things that the family could do to gain public support would be to pursue public forums to increase awareness and garner public interest. They could also consult with the ACLU or other human rights organizations. So, Jennifer Root Bannon, the sister of Justin, has been advocating for change and doing many of the things that I've already discussed and more. After she's been advocating for change after the death of her brother, um, especially when it comes to deadly force, using excessive force by law enforcement. So she's really been advocating for change in that regard. Her focus in advocacy efforts has been in police reform, so training, compliance, all of those things. Ending qualified immunity, which I've gone to kind of at length, that it is a big problem in this case and many, many others. And addressing mental health issues while policing. There needs to be some training in that, mandatory crisis training, as I said before. Even Brigham and Women's Health needed that, I think, in that scenario. So, and you would think that a hospital would have that kind of crisis training, but I don't know. Maybe not to the security guards, which is unfortunate. Jennifer Root Bannon also is the co-founder of a group called Impacted Families. This is a coalition of impacted family members who have lost a loved one during an interaction with law enforcement. Together, we are working towards advancing meaningful legislative change. That came right off of their website, which is provided to you here. I'm going to make these slides available to you in a Google Drive so you can download this and feel free to grab this information as you'd like. Use it as you will. All right, so Jennifer Root Bannon can also, or she is also an active member of the group called Massachusetts Action Against Police Brutality. This is a campaign to prosecute the police and jail those who are guilty, open all past cases of police brutality, end the harassment of victims and witnesses and family members of the victims. And they have a Facebook group. I couldn't find an actual website, but they did have a Facebook group there that you can look at. She's also an active member and speaker for the Massachusetts Coalition to End Qualified Immunity, which there is on this website. If you just take off the state.mass, go to the org or go to state, and you can pick your own state. So you can choose to become active in ending qualified immunity in your own state. So if you want to get more involved in it yourselves, I really recommend you go to their website here, the End Qualified Immunity organization here. Um, So, this coalition supports the Ending of Qualified Immunity Act, which aims to eliminate the legal doctrine of qualified immunity and restore civil liability for state and local officials, including police officers who violate citizens' legal and constitutional rights. Meaning, you could file a lawsuit against law enforcement if they did something violating someone's rights. Most of the time, it is qualified immunity. So you can't, even though it's shouldn't be. But that's how the courts are finding it to protect their own, as you see in this case. Jennifer Root Bannon is also a collaborator and rally participant for the Black and Brown Lives Matter in Boston, where their mission is to fight against state sanctioned violence, empower Black communities, and build Black futures. Because this crosses all lines of race. This is not just a white, Black, Hispanic, anything. This is a what's right and what's constitutionally right for the people versus the government. And so I love that she's getting involved in other groups as well that this impacts. She also signed a 2024 open letter from the International Service for Human Rights, or the ISHR, calling for transformative change in policing or racial justice and equality. The ISHR supports and acts in solidarity with human rights defenders in their work for freedom, dignity, equality, justice, and other fundamental values at the international, regional, and national levels. And they have a website there if you're interested in learning more. So, if that weren't enough, other advocacy efforts that Jennifer Root Bannon has been involved in includes testifying before Massachusetts legislators. She's spoken at coalition events, including rallies at the State House. She's spoken at George Floyd rallies. Remember, I spoke about George Floyd. That has kind of shifted the focus on qualified immunity and the discussion of that in our country, which um, that's great that she's a part of that narrative now. She's also testified in Connecticut's Judiciary Committee. She also spreads awareness through interviews with news channels and also going on other YouTube creators' channels and doing interviews there. And she started the justinroot.com website, which has a ton of information available, a lot of information that was helpful for this series. We are going to go over some of the information on the website in the last episode. So that's going to be kind of like a going over who Justin was and learning more about him and his family, seeing pictures of him and stuff like that. And then but she is the she's the one that created that website and got the word got the word spreading. So she is just very I want to say she's pretty amazing. I'll say that, doing all that she's doing for her brother and for other victims. Finally, the final, and I put this as my final point because in the next episode I'm going to veer off topic a little. I mean, not off topic. We're still talking about the Justin Root case, but I'm not going to talk about specifics as much of his case, but we're going to talk about what an independent investigation is, and well, I guess a little bit about his case, how it would help this case in particular, and relate to that. So we'll go into who's in charge of an independent investigation, how does it work, and that kind of thing. So I thought it would be interesting because this is the best and most appropriate way I think you guys can get involved. There's a petition on justinroot.com to open an independent investigation for the family. So, let's talk about it. So, advocacy for an independent investigation. This is the final option that I have for the family to pursue. So basically, we're asking for an independent investigation because the investigation into the shooting by Norfolk County and Suffolk County was biased. And the family has been saying that since the beginning, saying that they're biased and we need more accountability. We need an independent investigation, somebody who is not affiliated with the BPD and the Massachusetts State Police and can give an unbiased look at this case and tell us what the police did wrong, because obviously the police aren't going to say we did anything wrong. Potential outcomes of an independent investigation include new evidence could be uncovered, which would be key to a new civil suit. Administrative actions against the officers involved for policy violations. Remember, that was one of the options, was to advocate for that through the BPD or through, filing complaints through the BPD or the Post Commission. But if an independent investigation were to happen, it might become part of that process because they're going to be looking into the actions of the officers and decide if disciplinary or administrative actions are indeed necessary or appropriate in this case. Also, with an independent investigation, you can get, or a possible outcome would be increased public support for legislative changes and independent oversight in police shootings. So if we're able to adopt independent investigations into this, if police shooting, this can happen in more and more cases and become the standard so that the police aren't policing themselves yet again. Some challenges with this include the DA's reports that concluded the shootings were justified, and they really have showed no willingness to look any further into the case. Like I said, there were inconsistencies in many of the statements by the officers, and they are just like, yeah, we don't care. We don't need to, we're not curious to even look into those inconsistencies any further. Case closed, done. Some more challenges. So far, no new evidence has emerged yet, but that could change with an independent investigation. So it's kind of like you need new evidence to support a new suit, possibly a new investigation, but you also can get new evidence from the investigation. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword. All right. So also another challenge with getting an independent investigation would be that Andrea Campbell, the AG, the Attorney General for Massachusetts, has not responded to the family's call for action. So this is, of course, you want legislative government officials' support and approval of your efforts for legal change. And I think if anyone, where are the non-corrupt politicians in Massachusetts that are coming forward and saying this isn't right and we need change? Because that, if there are any out there, I highly recommend finding them and getting their support, because that would definitely shine a light on this case as well. But because Andrea Campbell hasn't spoken, maybe she's got some enemies, some political enemies you can find to kind of stir up. Hey, Andrea Campbell didn't do this, and if I had been the whatchamacallit in that, yeah, or the attorney general, I wouldn't do that, or whatever. Try to get some political opponents talking against how she's not supporting the family, perhaps. Also, independent investigations don't guarantee any legal remedies. So even if an independent investigation were to take place, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can file a new suit unless, new evidence of criminal or civil liability is found. It's not a guarantee. It's not a guarantee that, even if they do find that the officers violated something, it's not a guarantee that any of these things are going to come out of it. So that's another unfortunate challenge, but I think the option to advocate for an independent investigation, they've been doing this from the beginning. Like I said, it is the best option for you guys to get involved, sign the petition. You can also get involved with all of these other organizations if you feel so inclined. So, like I said, please go to justinroot.com to sign the petition in support of an independent investigation because that is probably the best way, the most, probably the easiest. And I'm not going to say easy, but out of all of the options, probably the easiest, less challenging option to pursue. Um, Especially with public support. If the public continues to push for independent support or independent investigation and possibly getting other political figures involved or speaking out about it, especially with the qualified immunity aspect of it, I think it could really catch on more publicly because this case, unfortunately, it's not catching on like the Karen Reed case or the Sandra Birchmore case, but it really should. And it's the predecessor to all of them, if in my opinion, and really shows how corrupt the whole system is. So there's my little 2 cents on that. So, like I said, please go to justinroot.com, sign the petition, and that should help the family. And if you want to reach out to them and provide any support, I also recommend doing that. Again, I will leave the slides for you in the link below, the description below, a link to the Google Drive document so that you can look at this on your own. And again, Jennifer Root, if you are listening and you want to reach out, my email is crimeandcourtchannel@gmail.com, and I would love to help you in your advocacy efforts in any way that I can. So hopefully, if you need me, I'm here. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. And like I said, next episode, we're going to go a little bit into what an independent investigation is and how it can help this case. And also, then the final episode, we'll kind of just do an overview of who Justin was and the people in his life and how he affected them. And we'll kind of do an overview of Justin, kind of an homage to him. So, that's what I have planned for you guys. So hopefully you stick with me. Please hit the like button and make sure you are subscribed for those future episodes. And I will see you next week. Take care. Bye now.